The following podcast, iDesign Lab, is an SW Group production in association with 5 Star and TW Interiors. This is iDesign Lab, a podcast where creativity and curiosity meet style and design. Curator of interiors, furnishings, and lifestyles. Hosted by Tiffany Woolley, an interior designer and a style enthusiast, along with her serial entrepreneur husband, Scott. iDesign Lab is your ultimate design podcast, where we explore the rich and vibrant world of design and its constant evolution in style and trends. iDesign Lab provides industry insight, discussing the latest trends, styles, and everything in between to better help you style your life through advice from trendsetters, designers, influencers, innovators, fabricators, and manufacturers, as well as personal stories that inspire, motivate, and excite. And join us on this elevated, informative, and lively journey into the world of all things design. Today, we're thrilled to have Kris Schlembach, a construction and design expert, joining us. With a background that blends construction, finance, and high-profile commercial projects, Kris found his true passion in residential renovations. He'll share insights on home design, scaling a business, and the rewarding connections he builds with his clients. Let's dive in.
Today, we want to welcome Kris Schlembach to the iDesign podcast. Kris is a seasoned professional from Wall Street, where he started, and now in Delray Beach, Florida, in the construction business.
I think he actually started in New Jersey in construction. Am I correct?
Yes,
Oh,
correct.
okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about that journey.
Just growing up, always helped out my dad around the house with simple things, projects, building bathrooms, you name it. Like anything he was about to do.
Really?
As a little kid, it started out just, here, I'll go get this, get that, handing him tools.
So your dad was in construction?
Yes. And always did all the things around the house, like added a bathroom to the house.
Really?
And we did the kitchen
Personally,
and that kind
on
of stuff.
his own?
Yeah, on his own. And he was always also very entrepreneurial. So I learned a lot about business as well, but it started out just as simple thing as hand a tool. Then as I got a little older, and when I say older, I mean maybe like 10. It's like, hey, do you want to come out on a weekend on a job site or something? I have a little bit of stuff to do. And, maybe he would pay me $20 and buy me lunch or something back then. It was, probably the early 80s. And it was like watching, I would start to learn and pick up things along the way and just sort of, kind of liked it. I always liked the idea of taking something and seeing it progress, like power washing. If you pressure washing, it's such a, there's so much instant gratification in it, to see something go from. That's why
there's so many TikTok videos.
It's just so rewarding to watch. So just did a lot of
power washing.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Like power washing, I love it because you take this,
You see the
it's
dirt.
instant gratification. You say, wow, look how beautiful that looks.
Right.
It's the same thing when we're doing
funny.
remodels to take this.
I agree.
Yep.
I always say that too about projects, that the new construction with a blank slate, granted, that's awesome and exciting, but there's so much gratification in taking something that looks absolutely horrible or in a time warp and really bringing it to the next
But you started
phase.
your career really in Wall Street, but what made you change to go to get into construction?
So I always, I went to school for finance. I always wanted to work in finance. Even through high school, I would, the other kids in study hall are flicking the football around, the little, paper football and playing around. And I was reading books about T. Boone Pickens and, these corporate raiders and trying to educate myself. And I actually even went and took college classes at the local community college when I was in high school.
Really?
So you were regarding the stock
passionate.
market and everything and trading. I had subscriptions to every single magazine you could, Fortune, Forbes, you name it, Wall Street Journal. And I would even run home at lunchtime. We only had maybe 35 or 40 minutes. I was a few blocks from the school. I would run home, watch Dan Dorfman on FNN
really?
back then, Financial News Network, which is now CNBC, and just look and learn. And I just loved it. I was kind of passionate about it, I guess. And eventually after college, I worked for a mortgage company initially, and then I was fortunate enough to get a job in a Wall Street firm as a trader, which is really, really, really hard to get into.
Right.
Really hard. But I was extremely persistent, and I found out later one of the people that worked in HR took my resume and put it right on the top of the pile. And they were getting 10,000 resumes a week.
That's
the firm where I got
insane
in.
to think
And they only
about.
hired like 12 people when I got hired. So it was really, when I got on that trading floor to interview, my heart was pounding, and I just kind of knew I was meant to be there. And it was incredible. So
How
basically
long did you spend
I was there
doing that
like
with
99 through 2001. So after 9/11, that was like a crazy situation, and the whole thing got turned upside down. And then we got bought out by a large Wall Street firm, and they changed everything. When I worked there, one of the things that attracted me to that particular firm is it was a meritocracy. So if I made that firm money, I would get paid.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter about my tenure.
Right.
So I'm like, this as an entrepreneurial person, I want to be paid on my merit, not on my tenure and things like that.
This is making
Right.
noise.
So just went along those lines of how I've always liked to do things. Even a lot of my employees, I'll pay them I'll incentivize them, you know,
Right.
because I feel that it makes people do better. And then
So what point did you wake up going, I want to change to go into construction?
well, I always throughout high school and college, I started learning a lot more about construction as I got older and was more capable. And I did kind of enjoy the thing about, you know, making something look a lot better and just like giving it a makeover. It's like, you know, reminds me of one of the old sitcoms or something where, oh, this girl, and they give her a makeover, and all of a sudden everybody's like, wow. You know, it's very rewarding. And then so in Wall Street after 9/11, and then we got taken over by another firm. They changed it. I got out of there around 2001 or so, and then I was offered a job out in San Francisco, but I didn't want to move out there. I wanted to stay in New Jersey area. So I figured, hey, I'll get back into the construction. And I started, my family had a business. I went back to work with my family, but it was very specialized. And we did large commercial projects, NASA, hospitals,
Local
airports.
areas.
From D.C. up to Rhode Island, all over like Northeast, like big commercial projects with unions and prevailing wage. We were all in the union and everything. And eventually I started spreading out and getting more into the general contracting arena up there in New Jersey. And then I just loved coming down here in Florida. I just loved the weather and the atmosphere and everything.
So it was a goal to get this way.
As I spent more and more time here, I started to kind of make some inroads. And I thought, well, I could probably work from Florida. And because a lot of our work was all over the Northeast, I wasn't physically on these projects most of the time. I was working from New Jersey, and I could be working a project that was 4 or 5 hours away. So so then when I would come down to Florida, there were times I would stay here for months at a time, and I would just fly up to D.C. for the day and fly back, or fly up to Rhode Island or whatever. And, you know, I could manage them with the technology we have nowadays, with cloud-based things, and it sort of eventually evolved that way.
Was this your company? Were you
Originally,
working for?
I worked for my dad, and then we had 3 companies. My brothers and I started another company, which was a manufacturing company, because we figured that we saw our cost of goods was one of our major,
Right.
you know,
Expenses.
Expenses.
So we thought, well, we can reduce our cost of goods, we'll increase our profitability, or even increase our competitive edge, because we can bid lower than other people and still get the job and make just as much money. So we initially rented some machinery. We learned how to manufacture different things, and then we eventually bought machinery. We became the licensee of this one company from Texas, and then we met with architects and just got into their specifications. So if a project was coming out of the ground, the architect specified a certain product, even if we weren't getting the entire contract, we could at least sell the material. So
Right.
it's like half a loaf is better than none.
Right.
And we were always privy to a lot more information as to what projects are coming out of the ground. So that business today, my brother runs it, extremely successful.
Wow. So he still does that.
Yeah, and I was in his facility this summer, and it blew me away. I mean, it's like 60,000 square feet. He does tens of millions a year in projects, you know, and it was something that we all started together.
That is so awesome.
But I wanted to move down here, and I have my, you know, I did general contracting, and it was, you know, coming from a commercial, really difficult, challenging projects. I mean, we had projects, we had helicopters bringing material onto roofs. We had shut down traffic in Washington, D.C. Imagine the
Right.
traffic there. So we had police on either end of the
true.
street shutting
Escort.
down traffic to escort the material in, and a big crane, so we had to have the streets shut down. So I've been involved in things that are a very high level of difficulty, a lot of coordination. So on the residential and the like what I'm doing now, general contracting, of course, there's a lot more facets to it, but I feel like it's a much easier process than what I was dealing with before.
What did the learning curve look like changing from commercial, moving towards residential?
It's a good question. So I had a project. A good friend of mine, his office is right up the street. He's a huge company, and they basically deal with like mold, fire, water damage, that kind of thing. He was always having trouble here in South Florida. Of course, there's not a lot of credible people, and you get a lot of shady people.
Yeah,
So
Florida
he
has a
asked me.
reputation.
He said, "Hey, I have all these projects coming in. We tear the houses apart because of the mold, and we don't have anybody. They're always asking us to have somebody put it back together, but we've been through dozens of contracts. We can't find anybody quality,
what a great
reliable."
segue for you.
And I said, "Well, I'll give it a shot. He goes, "I know you like big commercial stuff." I said, "I don't necessarily like it. That's what I
Right,
do.
yeah.
But I'll try some residential." So the first job I did, waterfront house, had mold. We put everything back together, and I thought, this is actually quite relaxing compared to the commercial environment I'm used to. It's so fast-paced and a lot of stress, and your meetings every day, and OSHA, and I mean, it's just so much prevailing wage reports to fill out.
A lot of bureaucratic.
It's just so much bureaucracy,
extra,
especially
yeah.
dealing with the large military projects we did in the airports and the hospitals and all that stuff. So it went over real well. I thought, this is not nearly as stressful. I like it. And the other thing that really I liked about it was that it seemed, I learned right away how grateful people, they had so much gratitude that we came in, did a good job, did what we said we were going to do. And I thought, this is so easy. All I have to do is show up on time, do what I say I'm going to do. I mean, this is natural to me just to do the
Right.
right thing. And but people aren't used to that, which blew me away.
Especially in Florida.
So
like
how
you
long
mentioned.
ago was that?
That was probably about 10 years ago, I'm going to say.
10 years ago.
Yeah,
So
started
did you
doing the
have
residential.
Did you have a general contracting license at
Yes.
that point?
Yes.
And
yeah.
what
So-
about putting together a team?
Because you have a team now that's behind you and your company.
Yes. Actually, it was more than 10 years ago. Yeah, it had to be like 15 years ago. Yeah, at least. Because I'll have to look when I got, I don't look back a lot. I'm always looking forward. And in the present. I'm in the present and I'm looking forward. I'm not
Right.
like, my wife would know exactly the year and the day and everything. But it was probably 10 or 15 years ago, roughly. So the team, originally, I was out doing all the work. I was doing everything, the tile, the demolition. I was out there getting my hands dirty. And I eventually got, I would weed through people. You get somebody and they're okay for a little while, then they start going downhill.
I know,
and then
I say that a lot,
eventually,
too.
as I would get bigger projects, I'd have a bigger pool to choose from, and I would always just keep the best guys. And the bottom, like say 20%, they're always on the chopping block, and I'm always looking to upgrade my team. But obviously, some of the guys have been with me a long time, like more than 12 years.
Really?
Yeah. So one time, I would sometimes guys would come and find me, and then I'm really fortunate. The guys I have who are just great guys and they do an excellent job, they tend to come to me with, "Hey, my nephew or
looking
my
to get
uncle
into the
came
business."
here from Cuba or something. Would you mind hiring him?" And I'd say, "Yeah, let's talk." And
We'll
then,
try it.
And even with any new people that come to me, when I first hire them, I make sure I put them with my best guys for a few weeks so they can evaluate the new employee and tell me how are they doing. And not only are they doing a good job, are they getting along with everyone? That's
Right.
really important to have cohesion.
So your company, KMR, is a pretty busy construction or remodeling company
Yes.
for mostly, let's say, high-end residential.
Yeah,
correct?
mostly. I prefer that.
And I know that last year you probably did, I don't know, 18 to maybe more than 20 houses, which is
probably
pretty
more.
aggressive and pretty busy.
Probably more than that. Yeah.
How important, because it's one of the things we love to talk about on this podcast, is design, in what you're doing. Design, how important is it, well, maybe the first thing I should ask is that of all those houses, how much of them is the design already been done?
Probably on the projects I do, probably about 40% the design is done. Some of them, the homeowner does the design themselves. And you get into some issues where there's not a cohesion of like the everything's tying together. I love, with the designer, I like working with you guys, for instance, because everything's already picked out. I'm not holding the hand of the customer. You're doing that. You're looking at their tastes and getting something that will work for that home and putting it all together. So for me, I'm not trying to pick out every single piece of material. And when I know ahead of time, that's really important. If we know ahead of time what material is going where, because there's a lot of considerations that people don't think of.
Right.
So having everything selected beforehand, before you start the project.
First of all, it helps me to price the
Timeline.
project.
Right.
That's one thing. It's really difficult to put a true price on something when you don't know what type of material, or for instance, if you do tile in a shower, it could be, say it's $1,000, but if you do a certain pattern,
Right.
it
Or
could
if
be
it's bigger sheets,
$4,000.
that's heavier.
Yes,
I
you could
know.
quadruple the
Mosaic
price.
or-
Yes, so we have to know about the materials ahead of time.
I mean, I would think even working with a designer, in the construction side, I always try to tell clients, let's come up with this design. Let's come up with this palette. Let's come up with this whole schematic, the vibe, everything. And when you do send it to price with contractors, you're getting pricing that's apples to apples too.
Exactly.
I would imagine that it's not the easiest to go bid a job based on, something in thin air, and then somebody else is coming, basing it on another
Something
thin
entirely
air.
different. That's such a great point. And it's like if you've heard in the real estate business, that realtor bought the listing. The house is worth $1 million, and they say, I'll get you $1.1 million. It's unrealistic, and the realtor knows the market, knows they're only going to get $950 or so, but they buy the listing. And I think a lot of times, I've seen it a million times actually with contractors, if there's a job, I'm $20,000, I'm being very realistic based on what they're doing, and to do it properly, it's going to cost that. And I'm not getting rich on that because another guy's at $12,000. I'm not making an extra $8,000. He's doing an entirely different job.
Yeah.
So they'll come in low,
Yeah.
and then they'll hit the customer with a bunch of crazy change orders, or they're coming in low because they're just slapping it together and not really doing. It's not apples and apples. It really isn't.
No.
Do you think most people, clients, realize how important design is prior? Or do you think most people think,
it
well, I can
depends.
kind of wing it as I go along?
So I would say the customers that do realize how important it is are A, customers that are doing higher end projects, and B, customers who have been through the construction
Done it
process
before.
previously. They realize, hey, you know what, we need to get
Right.
the planning done properly. Proper planning prevents poor performance.
I
okay?
love
And that's
that.
what they need
That's
to
a
do.
good slogan. I don't know why I don't use that one more often.
I get all these from my dad. He has a million of
That's
them.
a great one, actually. We should talk about that
Yeah.
in one of our tidbits. It's funny because I was actually at a job site the other day, a magnificent home, a magnificent property, and you would walk in and be like, wow, this is amazing. But the more you do dive into it, had you had a furniture layout that you were actually building around and lighting, I mean,
Huge.
there's huge,
Yeah.
and I hate to say that a beautiful project could have been better, but
That's why
It
you walk
could
into
have
these,
been better.
the model home,
yes.
and the new development is always designed around. The designer comes in and plans everything
Right.
out, and that's why it looks so amazing.
Yes.
But then a lot of times you buy, that model that's not designed, and it doesn't look
the
anything like
same.
the model home.
It's so true.
Well, it's all the finishes.
Yeah.
It's
It
all
is.
those.
It's all
yeah,
those layers that
touches
we
that
talk about.
A friend of
lot.
mine who I built their house, and they used a designer, and it's so amazing how the kitchen sconces, they have sea glass around them, and then the chandelier over in the dining room has the same sea glass on it, so it all ties in together.
Yeah.
And it's so just tied in. It looks, and a lot of times, we're talking about real obvious things, but if you go into a house, and this ties into the construction as well, if you walk into one house, let's say you have identical homes, one was done by the company that cuts corners and does it sloppily and just maybe, it's just not done right, and the other one was done where every little detail was considered. And you walk into those houses, at first glance, or if someone took photos, you might think that's the same house. But when you look, you'll have a feeling of, this one just feels so much nicer.
It does.
This one, I don't know what it is. I don't feel like it's that great. But and then it's your subconscious registering that paint trip over there and the little imperfections and all, and you're not seeing it. You like maybe without further looking at, you won't identify those specific things, but you will feel a difference when you walk into the house that's done properly versus the one that's just slapped together.
Without a doubt.
Do you think is there one big mistake you think people make from a design standpoint that seems to happen over and over?
It's hard to think about. I'm not really sure. Nothing really stands out particularly. It's just overall having that where everything ties together,
right.
And not just colors, but having a nice thing is to have
flow.
Yeah, but also where you have different textures and materials, soft and hard. Tile, but you don't want all tile. Now the room's echoey and too hard or masculine. You want some softness, and those kind of things make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And
lighting, yeah.
Lighting
sure.
is so important.
It really is. I know. I even like the temperature of lighting.
Yes.
To me is so important. Even just driving through our neighborhood, coming home at night, I'm like, oh, the light in that one house is so bright. It's just so off. It's not
well, most people are not thinking about the Kelvin temperature of
right,
lighting,
right? And these are things,
and how that changes the whole aesthetic of a house. That
there's so many things that look. I mean, this is what we do.
Right.
So we know all these little nuances. And
it's true.
You can't be good at everything. Do I hire a contractor to be my doctor or to take a tooth out? No.
Right.
I mean, I go to a dentist or a doctor. It's there's so many subtle things. I had someone call me as a favor the other day and say, Kris, could you come take a look at this for us? I said, sure, no problem. And they had done the signs in the front of the development. And
at your development?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm looking at it and I'm like, it looked great. Uh-huh. But I said, did you do this? Did you do that? And no, they kind of GC'd it themselves. The
neighborhood did?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, so that beautiful black tile you have on this wall with the sign where the water runs down it, that's all going to turn white.
I was going to say, was it waterproofed?
I said, you need to put a waterproof on it. You need to put a filtration system on the water. You need a carbon filter, something to filter out the calcium and everything. Mm-hmm. And when they put the tile on the wall, they should have used a certain thin set that does not have
the calcification.
The calcification come through.
I know.
And I already see it, and it was only done 2 weeks ago.
I know.
I drove out.
That's when you know you're with a good builder or a bad builder. I've had clients who relied on contractors. I didn't bring the contractor to the table or anything. I actually had a great working relationship with them. But that became a huge problem on the end result of the project that showed up right away.
Yep.
Was the calcification.
There's a million things like that. And it's just, it's not like you just know this stuff or you went to construction school,
and
but
if
it's
you're not
years
doing
and
it
years of
every
experience.
day, and if you're not doing it every day, you're not in the loop of it.
Exactly.
That's why you need to
and look,
on
we've
the
made a lot of
professional.
mistakes, but that's how we learned. It's been years and years and decades of
There's always still a new one.
Yeah, there's always something new will pop up. But
so you and your company KMR do a lot of projects, high-end homes, condos, townhouses.
Yeah.
Is there a design style that you like personally better? Like right now or the last few years, really modern has been
like
the
mid-century modern type stuff I like. I think
yeah.
it's like there's a good mix of materials, kind of a throwback, but like classy and
Updated,
modern,
yeah.
updated. It's like, it's cool. I like a mid-century modern. I've always been real privy also to like the, like that. It's like a beachy but sort of like modern. What would you call it? Transitional or
Like the West Indies.
Yeah, I love that
famous.
style.
Yeah, I agree. That's such a
a friend of
nice
mine
Florida
just
look.
built a beautiful 5,000 square foot house on the water in Key West, and I went down and looked at them. This is just it's that British West
Wow.
Indies style with the wood
Ceilings,
soffits
yeah.
outside and the just beautiful, but the details. The builder it needs to really brush up on his details, and my friend asked me, he said, please write down a punch list for me. We walked around the house for about 4 or 5 hours making a
Wow.
punch list. And I was telling him, just put a Post-it note on every little thing and write a little note on it and just put it all over the house. He used about 400 Post-it notes. He said, I wish you would have built my house. But I'm not doing work in Key Largo,
Right.
So is that a frustrating aspect of construction, is finishing a job and then having to deal with the client and what
Well,
they
sometimes
think is finished?
Yeah,
or
sometimes there's
punch list items
unrealistic
or-
expectations, and that's part of the job. Is managing people's
Managing them,
expectations
yes.
is really important. It helps. Communication is my number one thing, and then 2 is part of that is just managing the expectations. I have had issues where people, that's unacceptable. That's what they're saying, and I'm saying no, it is acceptable. It's actually right. This is the right way to do it. And I've referred to what my go-to is. I'll call the manufacturer and say, let's let them come out and take a look at
Right.
it. And sure enough, they come out and they go, this is perfect. It's not only is it well within our tolerances, this is exactly the way we want you to do it. Because we read the instructions before we do things. I mean, there's so many different things like flooring. If you're doing wood flooring, typically we'll let it rest inside the house for a minimum of
Yeah.
48 hours.
They say
Minimum.
that's
Before
not
you're
even-
installing
Before we
it.
install it. It has to acclimate
Right.
to the temperature and humidity.
Right.
There's so many little things that, but
Nuances.
some of them are glued down, some are floating. There's all these little things. Some of the materials require different installation methods or preparation. And we just, as long as we, that's why coming from the commercial, construction, I always made sure we followed all of the details to perfectly, just to the T, because we've had these meetings. I mean, big jobs, multi-million-dollar projects, commercial projects. And in the commercial arena, there are more people that will, as they play the game, they won't pay you just as a matter of doing business. That's just what they do. So they will come up with an excuse not to pay you and say, well, this isn't done correctly. So then we would have to call in the manufacturer's rep. We'd bring an architect. The architect would have to approve
almost
everything.
Like plead your case.
Yeah. And
They don't want to pay.
Yeah.
And
A
you
lot
have
of business
contract
people.
with them.
Yeah, a lot of let's say, like I had a case. There's a car dealership I was doing in Rhode Island, and they said, oh, they got down to like the last final $50,000 they owed us on the project, and everything was great. The entire project, it lasted 4 months. This project, they loved us the whole time. They couldn't say enough good about us. You guys are doing such a great job. We had a great rapport with them until it came time for them to make the final payment, and then all of a sudden they point out all these issues, which weren't issues. They made them up.
They made them up.
Sounds like they had a cash flow problem.
Either
Or
that,
they just
internally
they
in the
actually do
company.
that
Their-
on every
their
job.
way, yeah.
And they figure, hey, if
Some-
we save 10% on every project we do, that's
Yeah.
millions of dollars. That pays for the guy's speedboat and gas.
Yeah.
So now we have the manufacturer come out. They say, this is fine. Everything's perfect. So then they say, well, I owe you 50. I'll give you 35. Take it or leave
Yeah.
it. And now I talk to my attorney. He says it's going to take you
This long.
4 or 5
time.
years to get your money. By then, you're only saving. He's basically 15,000 you're losing. Plus, it's going to cost you 25,000 legal fees. Just take the 35.
It's definitely
And
a
it's
scheme.
happened. It's happened.
It's definitely a
it happens
scheme.
in commercial. It's knock on wood. It's only happened to me one time in residential, and the couple was going through a divorce, and I could have gone after them legally, but I did go after them like civilly, or I'm sorry, like a normal lawsuit,
Mm-hmm.
and I won, and they had to pay all my legal fees. But the people were going through a divorce, and it was more about them than
tit
paying
for
me.
tat type of
Yes,
thing, yeah.
neither wanted to pay. It's like, well, you pay it. No, you pay it.
Yeah.
Right, you got
And
stuck
what
in
they
the middle.
did, I really could have got them in trouble. It was an insurance project. The insurance company mailed out a joint check to them and me they forged my name and went and cashed the check.
Yeah, that's
so they could have been
unscrupulous.
Wow.
I could have
crew.
criminally went after them.
Yeah, that's an unscrupulous crew.
Yeah, but anyway, it all worked out. I got all my money.
What
So-
does the
No, go ahead.
day-to-day look like when you're running multiple projects?
So I rely heavily on my foremen that are out on the job to communicate with me. Sometimes it does, the communication doesn't happen because they're busy. So I will call them. If I can't make it out on a project to check on it, I'll FaceTime them. And that's great. We use WhatsApp all the time, and they go like this, and we'll discuss everything, and I'll say, okay, put this mark on the wall there. So it's almost like I'm there, which is great because that technology has really allowed me to scale up and do a lot more work. But basically my day consists of like two things. It's mostly project management and then bidding new projects. So I'm dealing with ordering material, scheduling plumbers, electricians, that kind of thing, ordering some materials, countertops. And then on the other times, I'm running around on estimates. And while I'm out running around doing estimates, hey, I'll stop in and check on these guys. I pop in on them and check on the jobs. And then the rest of the time, probably about 20% of my time is just spent running a business, doing payroll and accounting and dealing with insurance and all that kind of stuff.
So I'm guessing most of your work is coming through word of mouth.
Predominantly word of mouth, yeah.
Yeah, that's how it is.
Repeat customers.
It is for us.
Yeah. I had one, I just ran out to Wellington the other day. It was a woman who I did a job for I did a kitchen 5 years ago, and she was in Green Acres. Now she lives in Wellington. So I went out there, and she said, Kris, can you come out and look at this? So ran out there to look at it. It's a lot of repeat business.
When jobs come to you, do you prefer, or is there a preference that you'd rather a job coming to you from the client directly, or like with us when we work with you, coming through us as the decorator or the interior designer? Is there a preference that?
No, because if it's a client coming to me directly, it all just really depends on the project. Because if it's a smaller project, they don't really need a decorator. A lot of times, a simple bathroom or closet,
right.
It's a really simple thing. But when it's like the kitchen and the dining room, and maybe you're doing like a whole house, especially, I need a designer. But as far as where it comes from, it doesn't really make much difference to me because we work really well together and coordinate everything either way. Whether I bring the client to you or you bring them to me,
Right.
I don't think really makes a difference.
So jobs that are pretty decent sized jobs, do you prefer that an interior designer is involved?
Oh yeah. Because there are so many moving parts, so many little details that it's challenging for me to convey all of the material options to the customer, where you're set up for that. You're very well set up for that. You have all the samples here. I'm basically copy and pasting links and mailing them to them saying, how about this shower enclosure? How about this tile? Or why don't you go to Floor and Decor and pick out some tile and let me know?
Yeah.
You're a one-stop shop. You guys have it covered. You have all the beautiful samples and showroom, and you can put together a little design display for them, and it's just much, much better. And I think they get a better product that way.
I think so too. And I always say people who trust the process are technically much happier in the long run.
So technology, you mentioned, has helped your business in communicating with the client and your team. What about social media? Has social media and has that changed?
Yeah. So just recently, we were last year was a pretty slow year. Normally, we were in an average year, I would get 10 to 12 calls a week, on average. That's an average year. I've had times where I was getting 25 calls a week.
A week?
Yeah, a week.
How do you weed them out?
Google? How do you meet with them all?
So I don't. I when you're that busy, you have to basically
have a strategy.
Yeah. So what I would do typically I'll speak with the customer on the phone, feel out what they're trying to do, and I'll usually type in their address and look. Most of the time, there's pictures on Redfin or Zillow or Realtor.com, and I can see. I'll say, hey, are you talking about the bathroom with the 2 sinks and the showers to the left? Yeah, that's the one. And we start to discuss it, and I can see multiple photos, usually just online, without them Sometimes they'll email me the photos and we'll discuss it. And this is just a preliminary discussion. And I'll say, okay, you're roughly, depending on your material selections, you're somewhere between 40 and 50,000 for that project, roughly.
So that's interesting. So we did a podcast a few weeks back about budget, about how important it is to really get the client to discuss this from the very beginning of the project, because it really helps all of us guide that project to get done quicker and get a better presentation done. So how important it is to you to get a budget out of the person on that first call or two?
So for different aspects, you want to kind of gauge what level of construction they want. You're not going to offer, like if somebody has a $500,000 house, you're not going to offer them a $200,000 kitchen. It just doesn't make sense.
Right.
So that's part of like giving them a budget and trying to, I know some people ask people their budget. I don't do that. First I listen. I ask them questions and I listen to what they're saying, and I'm processing the information, especially if I go out and look at the house. I look at the neighborhood. I look at
what are people,
how expensive the home is. Is it a home in a neighborhood that if they put $100,000 into a master bath, are they going to get that out of it?
Right.
Well, if it's a waterfront house in Boca, no problem. Yeah. And there's some places they wouldn't. So it's really part of the process.
So you're not really asking them for a budget. You're basically, in most cases, giving them.
I'm giving them a range.
A range.
And part of that, the range is to give them a realistic budget as to what this is really going to cost to do it properly on the level that they're requesting, and that is commensurate with their home and property value.
So when you're getting so many of these leads every week, for example, and we're talking about how you weed through them, but is there one that's too big or too small that you...
Most of the time it has to do with geography. I don't want to go to Miami or even Fort Lauderdale and drive. It'll take you 45 minutes down 995 to go 50 miles, and then to go 3 miles from 95 to the beach takes you another 40 minutes. Like, I don't want to deal with that. I have to have something that's accessible so I can go check on it and not have excuses not to go. I mean, if I have to drive an hour and a half just to check on a job, I'm not going to that job very frequently.
Yeah, we have the same mindset.
Well, we do, but at least at the same token, we are not having to be managing a site every day too. Because we do have projects that are not exactly located in our
And then the other thing about the budgeting, it's sometimes people have completely unrealistic expectations. I could say, well, your bathroom, the way you want to do it, as you're explaining it to me, I'm thinking it's going to be between $18,000 and $20,000. And I can be fairly accurate like that. I mean, I've done hundreds, so I know about what it's going to be. And the variation in price has to do with the materials they select and
the level.
Patterns. And maybe there's some things that we run into that we're not aware of when we open up a wall. There could be something screwed up in there. So at that point, if they go, oh my God, $18,000, I thought it was going to be $10,000.
Then you're like,
well, I'm not driving out there to meet them for an appointment because they're unrealistic expectations. And so that weeds through a lot of it. Yeah. So I like to give a range before I even go out and spend 2 or 3 hours of my time giving them a free estimate.
I know.
So it's interesting because on our side, we're trying to get the number out of the client on what their expectation, what they think they have. Because if they're telling us, okay, I want to redo this bathroom, and they're throwing out a number, it then gives us a gauge of, okay, we can, what's your word?
I say we'll use this vendor, value engineer this way.
Value engineer to make that work. But at the same time, if it's a number that just doesn't make sense, then we're letting the people know that. Yeah,
I think it makes more sense for you to do that because the material
is variable. There's so many variables.
You
don't have as many variables.
No, I mean, like a faucet, you can buy one for $40. You can buy one for $2,000. No problem. A tub, you can buy $50,000 tubs.
Correct.
Agreed.
That's where it's nice and clear cut with construction. And it does give us a good understanding when people do say a little bit of a number where they'd like to be. And I always try to say being comfortable with that number.
I wonder how much those cabinets are that I sent you the other day. They're so beautiful.
Oh my gosh, they are so beautiful. It's funny. I've loved that line. And I forget, how do you say it? Like Wafis?
I don't even know.
Legal?
I'm not sure.
I'm drawing a blank.
But they're beautiful.
Beautiful. Well, I'm like, we need that client.
Yeah.
We do.
Well, it's also knowing the client, and it's like communication, all these things, like managing the expectations, knowing the client. I find that the most important thing to certain clients is different depending on the client. It's not always price. Price could be the fifth thing, the most important thing to some clients.
And that's a whole new system to gauge, really. Yeah. It really is. And you don't want to shortchange people who are willing to have that special range or that special fabric, It's because there is just so much out there that you really can curate a special
My friend
end result.
gave me, she had done a bathroom and I think her dining room and this wallpaper, and it was so beautiful and I always liked it. And she was over my house and she said, that wall, you should use that wallpaper I used. I have some left over. And she gave it to me. Well, then I later found out it was $2,500 a roll.
A panel or a roll?
Each roll was like $2,500 and it looks beautiful.
And she had rolls left over?
She had some left over, yeah. But it's so nice.
That's fun.
Yeah, but I mean, it's the right thing for her house, and it just so happened I used it for a small area, but I wouldn't have paid $2,500. But that's me.
Right.
But some people, they want the best and the most beautiful thing. It's the perfect thing for that wall. Let's get it.
Right. I love working with that type of client.
So for a person who wants to become a young person who wants to become a contractor, general contractor, what piece of advice would you give them?
I would say like the best thing in any type of endeavor you want to get into is to try to find a good mentor. That's got to be your best bet.
Mm-hmm.
So your mentor is your dad.
On the job training.
Yeah, my mentor is my dad in many aspects of not only life, but in business in general. And I find that so many things translate from business to business to business. If you have integrity, you treat people right, you have a good work ethic, and I could say 10 or 15 different things, it's going to translate well into any business you're in. Mm-hmm. So I think they're the most important things. But then specifically the technical aspects, I would go work for somebody and try to learn. You have to work in the field too, because it's really important to actually get that field experience. It helps you visualize things getting done in a step-by-step process. You know what's actually involved rather than just using a software program to throw a price out there, which I've had to use the software programs for pricing because I've done a lot of insurance work, and they essentially require it. It's almost mandatory in the insurance industry.
Like an estimating.
It's Xactimate is one of the programs, and they want very detailed breakdowns of everything, where I might say, hey, in this room, I'm going to charge you $500 to paint the room. It's implied that I'm going to cover and protect the floors, move the furniture out of the way, and put masking tape.
Right, but
you need to break that down individually by line item on the insurance work.
Wow.
Which is kind of cool in a way because I've done a lot of insurance work, and it helped me think that detailed level of this is everything we're going to need,
I like that. There's constant learning every day.
Yeah. Oh, always learning.
Do you think any of your kids will jump in with you?
I don't think. Well, it's possible, but I mean, my oldest son, my one son's going to school for engineering. The other one, he wants to do something in business or sales, so it's possible. Yeah.
Would you like them to?
I wouldn't like them to. It's really tough. It's a very stressful job. It's like there's a lot of people's expectations are completely unrealistic. That's why I say managing the expectations, keeping them their feet planted on the ground.
Good, clear communication.
Very, very good. Yeah,
communication ongoing all the time really helps.
Huge. Yeah. It's a tough business, but at the same time, it's rewarding and seeing the transition.
Freeing.
And I have a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
I travel a lot.
Yeah.
And I can, if my son had a basketball game at 1:00 in the afternoon, I would have no problem going to the game.
To go.
As opposed to, when I did work on Wall Street, I was pinned to the computer screen. When the market's open, I could barely get up to take a leak. I mean, I'm pinned to that screen.
Yeah. It's so crazy that you had such a passion for Wall Street, and that in such a short period of time you realized there was another way.
I did love it, but I didn't like the associated rat race, because at that time you pretty much had to be in New York, So I like living in South Florida. Now there's hedge funds. There's like 2,000 hedge funds in Palm Beach County or something like that.
It's crazy.
There's a lot of different, aspects of it now, but it's different. What I did, a lot of it's handled by automated systems, computer programs, are doing what my job was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
It's
so crazy
program
to
trading.
think about.
Everything's programs. There's triggers that occur, and boom, all of a sudden, millions of shares are traded instantaneously. It's a different world.
That is a different world.
So we wrap up each of our podcasts by asking some interesting design questions. So the first question I'm going to ask you, and you are a world traveler. You're traveling, like you just said, all the time. Is there a hotel that comes to mind that you think has fantastic, unbelievable design?
The Breakers is always just so impressive to me. I love the old, it's so ornate. It reminds me of being in Europe, where you have everything is so grand and rich and just bold, and a lot of places you go are very clean and modern, but it's antiseptic. It has no passion,
Well,
I
the
just
Boca
love.
Hotel used to be like that. Years ago.
I'm not
but
so
now
crazy
it's-
about it anymore.
No, I know. Me too.
But I love the places in Europe. Just like I went to a place in London, the St. Ermins in Westchester. It was so cool. A lot of marble, a lot of old, just stuff that you look at it and you're just blown away by how did they build
And the
this.
history,
Some of
the
these
craftsmanship.
places,
You have such appreciation
Oh, I love
for.
it. I love the craft. Even the doors when you're in Paris, just looking at some of the front doors in these houses.
It's amazing.
It blows me away.
It blows
you could
me
create
away,
a whole
too.
book of just the doors.
Yes,
Right.
you really could. I think somebody has.
I love the detail, and I have a very a major appreciation for it. Everywhere I go, like Croatia and Italy and all these places, it's like the architecture blows me away.
I
Especially
know.
some of the cathedrals, they're breathtaking.
They really are.
It's like, how did they do this? It's really cool.
I know, with such passion. What is your favorite event to attend?
I don't really attend any events for construction or anything. I probably
No,
should.
like any event in life, a sport game or Cavallino or
I-
all these.
I love
Anything
I
at
love
Mar-a-Lago.
concerts, but I don't. Yeah, I love going to Mar-a-Lago. Usually stuff that's associated with outside, any outdoors. I love. We took our boat down to watch the what's the big concert, the country concert they have.
Can you do that
Tortuga?
this year?
Yeah,
My girls
Tortuga.
want to go.
Yeah,
Can we do
we'll take
that?
our boat down.
Can we go?
Yeah. We're jumping off the
Oh
boat.
my
We're
gosh, my
swimming,
kids will
listening
go
to
nuts.
music. It's great. I love stuff like that.
That's actually so
Yeah,
fun.
that was the kids had a blast. They're doing backflips off the top of the boat and there's
there
a
a
lot
lot
of
of boats out there?
A lot of boats, yeah.
My kids, that's on their Christmas list was tickets to Tortuga.
I like the air shows too. We've done that
Yeah.
with the boat. Planes are flying right over your head.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
That is
Yeah.
really fun.
So what's a restaurant, design-wise, not necessarily food, but
Design-wise.
design, that you've...
That's a tough one.
When you've been to a lot of
I know,
different
a lot of
restaurants all over
restaurants.
the world, is there
What do you
one that
think?
stands out that you could say, the design was...
There's there's so many. I like so many of them. I'm trying to think. It's hard. There's a new place. I kind of like the decor in it. Up in West Palm, Pink Steak.
Oh, yeah,
Have you
that's
been there?
cute.
It's a cool
No.
place. It's kind of
Yeah.
neat.
Is it a big place, a small?
It's
or-
pretty big. Yeah, it's pretty big. It's in a shopping center. You wouldn't think much of it from the outside, but when you go in, it's really well done. Very nice.
And how's the
Very
food?
nice. Food's great.
Huh.
Really good.
All right. So, lastly, your favorite wardrobe accessory.
I don't wear many, but probably my wedding ring.
Oh,
It
good
reminds me of my
answer.
beautiful wife.
Oh, good answer. Well, that's a good way to end the show today.
We appreciate you coming in and spending
Sure.
some
Good to
time
see you
with us.
guys.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
iDesign Labs podcast is an SW Group production in association with the 5-Star and TW Interiors. To learn more about iDesign Lab or TW Interiors, please visit twinteriors.com.